The sound of shattering glass pierced the air, followed by a string of expletives that would make a sailor blush. I rushed into the kitchen, my heart pounding, to find Mark standing over a mess of broken dishes and spilled pasta sauce. "Damn it, Julia! Can't you put things away properly?" he snapped, his face flushed with anger. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that he was the one who had insisted on reorganizing the cabinets last week. Instead, I grabbed a broom and dustpan. "It's okay, honey. Accidents happen. Let me clean this up." As I swept up the shards, Mark stomped out of the kitchen, muttering under his breath. I sighed, feeling the weight of tension settle over our once peaceful home. "Everything all right down there?" Dennis's voice called from upstairs. "Fine, Dad," I shouted back, wincing at the strain in my voice. "Just a little accident, nothing to worry about." I finished cleaning and started on a new batch of pasta sauce, my mind wandering to happier times. It hadn't always been like this. When Mark and I first got married, we were blissfully happy, but then his father's accident changed everything. The timer on the stove buzzed, snapping me back to reality. I stirred the sauce and called out, "Dinner's ready!" Mark trudged back into the kitchen, his mood seemingly improved. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, nuzzling my neck. "Smells good, babe. Sorry about earlier." I leaned into his embrace, savoring the moment of peace. "It's okay. Let's just enjoy dinner, all right?" We set the table as Dennis made his way downstairs, each step slow and deliberate. I rushed to help him into his chair, ignoring Mark's impatient sigh. "How are you feeling today, Dennis?" I asked, spooning pasta onto his plate. He smiled weakly. "Better, thanks to you, Julia. Don't know what I'd do without you." Mark rolled his eyes. "Dad, you've got to start doing more for yourself. Julia's not your nurse." I shot Mark a warning glance. "It's fine. I'm happy to help." We ate in uncomfortable silence, the only sounds the scraping of forks against plates. I was about to attempt some small talk when the doorbell rang. Mark jumped up. "I'll get it!" I frowned, surprised by his eagerness. A moment later, I heard a familiar voice that made my stomach churn. "Hello, darlings." Patricia's shrill tone carried through the house. "I hope I'm not interrupting dinner." Mark's mother swept into the dining room, all designer clothes and overpowering perfume. She air-kissed Mark's cheeks before turning to me with a tight smile. "Julia, dear, you look tired. Are you getting enough rest?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Patricia. Would you like to join us for dinner?" "Oh no, I've already eaten. I just stopped by to discuss something with Mark." She turned to her son. "Do you have a moment, sweetheart?" Mark nodded eagerly. "Of course, Mom. Let's talk in the study." As they left, I caught a glimpse of Patricia slipping an envelope into Mark's hand. My curiosity piqued. I strained to hear their hushed conversation, but could only make out fragments. Perfect opportunity. She doesn't need to know. Take care of everything. A chill ran down my spine. What were they planning? Dennis cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to the table. His eyes, usually clouded with confusion, were surprisingly sharp. "Julia," he said softly, "I think we need to talk." Before I could respond, Mark and Patricia returned, both wearing suspiciously cheerful expressions. "Great news," Mark announced. "Mom's invited us on a trip to Europe, 2 weeks in Paris and Rome. Isn't that exciting?" I blinked, stunned. "But what about your father? We can't just leave him alone." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we'll hire a nurse. It'll be fine." As Mark launched into enthusiastic travel plans, I caught Dennis's eye. He gave me a subtle nod, confirming my growing suspicion that something wasn't right. In that moment, I realized our seemingly perfect family was about to be turned upside down. And I had a sinking feeling that I was the only one not in on the secret. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving us standing in Patricia's driveway, surrounded by boxes and uncertainty. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the anxiety bubbling in my chest. This was supposed to be temporary, just until we could find a place better suited for Dennis's recovery. But as I caught Patricia's critical gaze sweeping over our belongings, I had a sinking feeling that temporary might stretch longer than I'd hoped. "Well, don't just stand there gawking," Patricia chirped, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Let's get you settled in." Mark grabbed a box and followed his mother inside, leaving me to help Dennis navigate the front steps. As we made our way into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were crossing a threshold into something far more complicated than a simple living arrangement. The first few days were a whirlwind of unpacking and adjusting. Patricia flitted about, offering unsolicited advice on everything from how to arrange our clothes to the proper way to make coffee. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that she was doing us a favor by taking us in. One morning, I was helping Dennis with his physical therapy exercises when Patricia burst into the room, her face pinched with displeasure. "Julia, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I couldn't help but notice you've rearranged the guest room. I thought we agreed you'd keep things as they were." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, Patricia. I just moved a few things to make it easier for Dennis to get around." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Well, I'd appreciate it if you'd consult me before making any changes. This is still my house, after all." As she turned to leave, I saw Dennis roll his eyes behind her back. I stifled a laugh, grateful for the moment of shared frustration. The weeks wore on, and Patricia's helpful suggestions became more frequent and less subtle. She critiqued my cooking, my cleaning, even the way I helped Dennis. Mark, ever the dutiful son, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. One evening, I was folding laundry when I overheard Patricia and Mark talking in hushed tones in the study. "I'm just saying, Mark, she's not exactly wife material," Patricia hissed. "The way she coddles your father, it's like she's forgotten her place in this family." My hands froze mid-fold, my heart pounding in my ears. Mark's response was muffled, but I caught enough to make my blood run cold. "I know, Mom, but we need her right now, just until Dad's better, and we can—" The rest of his sentence was lost as they moved further into the room. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my mind reeling. What were they planning? And how could Mark talk about me like that? Later that night, as Mark snored softly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts a tangled mess. I thought about the life we'd left behind, the dreams we'd had. When had everything gone so wrong? A soft knock at the door jolted me from my reverie. I padded across the room, opening it to find Dennis standing there, looking more alert than I'd seen him in weeks. "Julia," he whispered, his eyes darting nervously down the hall, "we need to talk. There's something you should know about Patricia and Mark." My heart raced as I ushered him into the room. As Dennis began to speak, his words confirming my worst fears and revealing even darker truths, I felt the last vestiges of my old life crumbling away. In that moment, standing in the dim light of Patricia's guest room, I realized that the family I thought I'd married into was nothing but a carefully constructed facade. And as Dennis laid bare the web of lies and manipulation that surrounded us, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone. It was time to make some calls and start planning my next move. Because one thing was crystal clear. I couldn't stay in this house of secrets and lies for much longer. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a silent vow. I would protect Dennis, uncover the truth, and find a way out of this mess, no matter the cost. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, mocking my exhaustion. I'd been up since dawn, preparing breakfast, tidying the house, and helping Dennis with his morning routine. As I scrubbed dishes, my mind wandered to the life I'd imagined for myself. This certainly wasn't it. "Julia!" Patricia's shrill voice cut through my reverie. "Where's my morning tea?" I bit back a sigh. "Coming, Patricia." As I set the steaming cup before her, Patricia wrinkled her nose. "Is this Earl Grey? You know I prefer English breakfast in the morning." "I'm sorry," I said, forcing a smile. "We're out of English breakfast. I'll pick some up today." Patricia huffed. "See that you do. And while you're at it, the living room could use a good dusting. Really, Julia, I expected better from you." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to snap back. Instead, I nodded and retreated to the kitchen, where I found Mark lounging with his coffee. "Honey," I started, "I could really use your help today. Dennis has a doctor's appointment, and I need to run errands." Mark cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Sorry, babe. I've got a big meeting at work. You can handle it, right?" Before I could respond, he was out the door, leaving me alone with my frustration and a mountain of tasks. The day dragged on, each hour bringing a new challenge. Dennis struggled with his physical therapy, his progress seeming to plateau. Patricia's complaints echoed through the house, a constant reminder of my perceived shortcomings. By evening, I was at my breaking point. As I helped Dennis into bed, he squeezed my hand, his eyes full of concern. "Julia," he said softly, "you can't keep going like this. It's too much for one person." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "What choice do I have, Dennis? Mark's always working, and Patricia—" I trailed off, not wanting to speak ill of his wife. Dennis shook his head. "Patricia has always been difficult, but this is beyond the pale. And Mark?" He sighed heavily. "My son should be ashamed of himself." Just then, Patricia's voice rang out from downstairs. "Julia, where are you? These floors won't mop themselves." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "I should go," I murmured to Dennis. As I descended the stairs, I found Patricia standing in the foyer, arms crossed. "Really, Julia," she began, her tone dripping with disdain, "I don't know why you insist on spending so much time with Dennis. He's perfectly capable of putting himself to bed." Something inside me snapped. "He's your husband, Patricia, and he needs our help. Why can't you see that?" Patricia's eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? I've been nothing but generous, taking you in, and this is how you repay me?" "Generous?" I laughed bitterly. "You've done nothing but criticize and complain since we got here. I'm doing my best to take care of everyone, and it's never enough for you." Our voices had risen, echoing through the house. I heard the front door open, and Mark stepped in, looking bewildered. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Patricia turned to her son, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, Mark, your wife is being absolutely dreadful to me. I don't know how much more of this I can take." Mark's face hardened as he looked at me. "Julia, what's wrong with you? How could you treat my mother this way?" I stared at him, incredulous. "Are you serious? After everything I've done, you're taking her side?" The tension in the room was palpable. I looked from Mark to Patricia, suddenly seeing them clearly for the first time. They were two sides of the same coin, manipulative and self-serving. In that moment, I made a decision. "I'm done," I said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." Mark's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. "I'm saying that something has to change. Either we leave this house or I'm leaving alone." The silence that followed was deafening. As I turned and walked away, leaving Mark and Patricia stunned in the foyer, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain: things would never be the same again. The days following my outburst were tense, to say the least. Mark barely spoke to me, spending most of his time at work or locked away in Patricia's study. Patricia, for her part, had taken to ignoring me entirely, communicating only through icy glares and pointed sighs. But amid the frosty silence, I found an unexpected source of warmth: Dennis. One morning, as I helped him with his exercises, he grasped my hand firmly. "Julia," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard in weeks, "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you're doing." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you, Dennis. That means more than you know." He nodded, a determined look crossing his face. "I've been thinking. It's time I started pushing myself harder." "Will you help me?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a spark of hope ignite in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Dennis and I fell into a new routine. We'd start each day with more challenging exercises, pushing the boundaries of what he could do. Some days were frustrating, filled with setbacks and pain. But there were also moments of triumph. The first time he stood unassisted, the day he managed to walk the length of the hallway with just a cane. Each small victory felt like a personal win, a reminder that my efforts weren't in vain. As Dennis grew stronger, so did my resolve. One afternoon, as we rested after a particularly grueling session, Dennis turned to me with a serious expression. "Julia, there's something you need to know about Patricia and Mark." My heart raced. "What is it?" Before he could answer, the door burst open. Patricia stood there, her face a mask of fury. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "You're pushing him too hard. He's not ready for this." I stood my ground. "Dennis is making great progress. The doctor agrees that—" "The doctor?" Patricia interrupted. "What doctor? I haven't authorized any appointments." "I did," Dennis said firmly. "I'm perfectly capable of making my own medical decisions, Patricia." Patricia's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Mark!" she shrieked. "Mark, come here at once." Moments later, Mark appeared, looking flustered. "What's going on?" Patricia pointed an accusing finger at me. Your wife has been making decisions behind our backs. She's endangering your father's health." Mark's expression hardened. "Is this true, Julia?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I've been helping Dennis with his recovery. Yes, and he's improving. If you'd been around more, you'd see that." Mark's eyes flashed with anger. "How dare you? We took you in, gave you a place to stay, and this is how you repay us?" "Repay you," I laughed bitterly. "I've been working myself to the bone taking care of this family while you two plot and scheme behind my back." The room fell silent. Dennis cleared his throat. "Son, your wife is right. She's been doing all the work while you and your mother—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Mark's face paled. "Dad, you don't understand. We're just trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Dennis demanded. "From getting better? From regaining my independence?" Patricia stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. "Darling, you know your condition is delicate. We just want what's best for you." I watched the exchange, pieces falling into place. The hushed conversations, the mysterious meetings, the resistance to Dennis's recovery, it all pointed to something sinister. "What are you two hiding?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark and Patricia exchanged a panicked look. In that moment I knew. Whatever secret they were keeping, it was big, and it had everything to do with Dennis's accident and recovery. Dennis struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane. "I think it's time we had a family meeting," he said, his voice filled with a quiet authority I'd never heard before. "No more secrets, no more lies." As I helped Dennis to the living room, my mind raced. Whatever was about to be revealed, I had a feeling it would change everything. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was ready to face it head on. The time for playing happy families was over. Now it was time for the truth. The tension in the living room was palpable as we gathered for the long-overdue family meeting. Dennis sat in his armchair, his posture more upright than I'd seen in months. Mark and Patricia perched on the edge of the sofa, exchanging nervous glances. I stood by the fireplace, my heart pounding. Before anyone could speak, Patricia cleared her throat. "Before we get into whatever this is, I have an announcement to make." She plastered on a bright smile. "Mark and I are going on a vacation to Europe, 2 weeks in Paris and Rome. Isn't that wonderful?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "What, now? But what about Dennis's care?" Mark avoided my gaze. "We thought you could handle it, Julia. You've been doing such a great job." Dennis's eyes narrowed. "And when were you planning to inform me of this little getaway?" Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, darling, we didn't want to burden you with the details. You know how travel talk exhausts you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you're just going to leave? After everything that's happened?" "Now, Julia," Patricia said, her voice sickly sweet. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a little vacation. We all need a break sometimes, don't we?" Something inside me snapped. "A break? A break from what exactly? From watching me run myself ragged, taking care of your family while you two scheme and plot?" Mark stood up, his face flushed. "That's enough, Julia. You're out of line." "No, she's not," Dennis said quietly. "Julia's right. It's time we address the elephant in the room." He turned to Mark and Patricia. "What really happened the night of my accident?" The color drained from Patricia's face. "I don't know what you mean, darling. You fell down the stairs, remember?" Dennis shook his head. "No, I don't remember. But I've been having flashes, arguments, raised voices, something about the company." Mark's hands were shaking. "Dad, you're confused. The doctors said your memory might be affected." "Stop lying," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my words. "Whatever you're hiding, it ends now. Dennis deserves the truth." Patricia stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Mark, we're leaving. Now." As they moved towards the door, I blocked their path. "Not until you explain yourselves." Mark's eyes flashed with anger. "Move, Julia. You have no idea what you're getting into." "Then enlighten me," I challenged. For a moment, I thought Mark might push past me, but then his shoulders sagged. "Fine. You want the truth? Dad was going to sell the company. He said he was tired, wanted to retire. But Mom and we couldn't let that happen. We tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen." Dennis's voice was barely a whisper. "So you what? Pushed me down the stairs?" Patricia let out a strangled sob. "It was an accident. We were arguing, and you just fell. We never meant for any of this to happen." The room spun around me as the implications of their confession sank in. They had been willing to let Dennis languish, to keep him dependent, all to maintain control of the company. "You monsters," I breathed. Mark reached for me. "Julia, please. You have to understand." I recoiled from his touch. "Understand what? That you've been lying to me our entire marriage? That you were willing to sacrifice your own father's health for money?" Oh, Patricia's eyes hardened. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" Dennis's voice boomed through the room. With effort, he pushed himself to his feet. "Mark, Patricia, I want you out of this house. Now." "But, Dad—" Mark started. Dennis held up a hand. "No, I've heard enough. Go on your vacation. When you return, my lawyers will be in touch." As Mark and Patricia hurried out, casting panicked glances over their shoulders, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. The truth was out, but the battle was far from over. Dennis turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "Julia, I'm going to need your help. Are you with me?" I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "Every step of the way, Dennis. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the door slammed behind Mark and Patricia, I knew we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The life I had known was over. But perhaps, just perhaps, something better was about to begin. The house felt eerily quiet in the days following Mark and Patricia's hasty departure. Dennis and I moved through the rooms like ghosts, each lost in our own thoughts. The weight of recent revelations hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the betrayal we'd both endured. On the third morning, I was preparing breakfast when Dennis wheeled himself into the kitchen, a determined look on his face. "Julia," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard in months, "we need to talk." I set down the spatula, my heart racing. "What is it, Dennis?" He took a deep breath. "I haven't been entirely honest with you. My recovery, it's been progressing faster than I've let on." To my astonishment, Dennis pushed himself up from the wheelchair, standing on shaky but steady legs. He took a few tentative steps towards me, no cane in sight. "Oh my God," I breathed. "Dennis, this is amazing, but why didn't you tell me?" His eyes clouded with shame. "I was afraid of what Patricia and Mark might do if they knew I was getting better. But after what happened, I can't hide anymore." As the implications of his words sank in, a mix of emotions washed over me. Joy at his progress, anger at the deception, and a growing sense of determination. "We need to act fast," I said, my mind racing. "Mark and Patricia could be back any day. We need a plan." Dennis nodded grimly. "I've been thinking about that. I know where Patricia keeps all the important documents, financial records, company papers, everything. If we can get our hands on those—" "We could expose them," I finished, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. For the next few hours, Dennis and I pored over the house, searching for any evidence of Mark and Patricia's misdeeds. We found hidden bank statements showing suspicious transfers, emails discussing the accident, in coded language, and even a draft of a revised will that would have left Dennis with nothing. As we sat surrounded by damning evidence, Dennis's phone buzzed. His face paled as he read the message. "It's Mark," he said, his voice tight. "They're coming back early. They'll be here tomorrow morning." Panic clawed at my throat. What do we do? Dennis's eyes hardened with resolve. "We finish this tonight." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. We scanned documents, made copies, and prepared a detailed timeline of events. Dennis called his lawyer, arranging an emergency meeting for first thing in the morning. As night fell, we sat in the living room, the fruits of our labor spread out before us. The magnitude of what we were about to do hit me like a tidal wave. "Dennis," I whispered, "are you sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back." He reached out, grasping my hand tightly. "Julia, you've been more family to me in these past months than my own flesh and blood. Whatever happens, we face it together." Tears pricked at my eyes as I nodded, squeezing his hand in return. Suddenly, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered the moment. My blood ran cold as I heard familiar voices approaching the front door. "They're back," I hissed, panic rising in my chest. "What do we do?" Dennis's face set in grim determination. "We stand our ground. No more hiding. No more lies." As the key turned in the lock, I felt a strange calm settle over me. We'd prepared for this, planned for every contingency. Whatever Mark and Patricia threw at us, we were ready. The door swung open, revealing Mark and Patricia, their faces a mix of surprise and suspicion as they took in the scene before them. "What's going on here?" Mark demanded, his eyes darting between Dennis and me. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Welcome home," I said, my tone laced with steel. "We need to talk." As Mark and Patricia stepped into the room, the air crackled with tension. This was it, the moment of truth. Everything we'd been through, everything we'd discovered had led to this confrontation, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. The tension in the room was suffocating as Mark and Patricia stood frozen in the doorway, their eyes darting between Dennis and me, and the incriminating documents spread across the coffee table. "What is all this?" Patricia demanded, her voice shrill. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "This is the truth, Patricia. All of it." Mark stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. "What have you done, Julia, going through our private papers? This is a violation." "No," Dennis interrupted, slowly rising to his feet. "The only violation here is what you two have done to this family." Patricia's face drained of color as she watched her husband stand. "Dennis, how... You're walking." "No thanks to you," I spat, my anger finally boiling over. "We know everything. The accident, the company, the will, all of it." Mark lunged forward, reaching for the papers, but I was quicker. I snatched them up, backing away. "Don't even think about it, Mark. It's over." "You don't understand," Mark pleaded, his composure cracking. "We were trying to protect the family legacy. Dad was going to throw it all away." Dennis's voice was cold as steel. "It wasn't yours to protect, son. The company, the money, none of it matters more than trust and family, something you seem to have forgotten." Patricia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You ungrateful little witch," she hissed at me. "We took you in, gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? By turning my husband against us?" I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. "You did this to yourselves, Patricia. Your greed, your manipulation. It ends now." The room erupted into chaos. Mark lunged for the documents again, this time managing to grab a handful. Patricia screamed accusations, her carefully manicured facade crumbling. Dennis tried to intervene, but in the scuffle, he lost his balance. Time seemed to slow as I watched Dennis fall. In that moment, all I could think about was that night, the night of his accident. Had it looked like this? Had he reached out, desperate for help, only to be betrayed by those he trusted most? I dove forward, managing to catch Dennis before he hit the ground. As we stumbled, my elbow caught the edge of the coffee table. Pain exploded through my arm, but I held on, easing Dennis onto the sofa. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice raw with emotion. "Look at what you're doing. Your own father. You'd risk hurting him again just to cover your tracks?" Mark froze, the papers clutched in his trembling hands. For the first time I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. Patricia, however, was beyond reason. "You have no right," she seethed. "This is our home, our family. You're nothing but an interloper, a gold digger who—" "That's enough, Patricia," Dennis cut in, his voice quiet but firm. "Julia is more family to me now than either of you, and as of this moment you are both no longer welcome in this house." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's face crumpled, the reality of what he'd done finally sinking in. Patricia stood rigid, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You can't be serious," she finally managed. "You can't just throw us out. Where will we go?" I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "That's not our problem anymore. You have until morning to pack your things and leave. If you're not gone by then, we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities." As the weight of our words sank in, I saw the fight drain out of Mark and Patricia. They looked suddenly small, defeated, no longer the towering figures of authority and control they'd once been. Dennis reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "It's over," he whispered. But as I looked at the broken family before me, at the husband I'd once loved and the life I'd thought I wanted, I realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. "No," I said softly, straightening my shoulders. "It's just beginning." The morning sun streamed through the windows as Dennis and I sat in his study, surrounded by stacks of documents and a sense of grim determination. It had been a week since we'd confronted Mark and Patricia, a week of sleepless nights and endless preparation. Today was the day we'd take everything public. "Are you ready for this?" Dennis asked, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a mix of sadness and resolve. I took a deep breath, nodding. "As ready as I'll ever be." What about you? This is your family we're about to expose. Dennis reached across the desk, grasping my hand. You're my family now, Julia. What Mark and Patricia did, they stopped being family the moment they chose greed over love. With trembling fingers, I pressed send on the email that would change everything. In an instant, our carefully compiled evidence was on its way to the board of directors, the company's legal team, and select members of the press. The response was almost immediate. My phone began buzzing incessantly with calls and messages. Dennis's lawyer arrived, looking grim but determined. As the morning wore on, the story broke across local news channels. Breaking news: scandal rocks prominent family business. CEO Dennis Hawthorne alleges attempted murder and fraud by son and wife. I watched the headlines scroll across the screen, feeling a surreal mix of vindication and sorrow. This was it, the moment of truth we'd been working towards. Suddenly, the front door burst open. Mark stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "How could you do this?" he shouted. "You've ruined everything." I stood my ground, facing the man I once thought I loved. "No, Mark. You ruined everything the moment you chose money over your father's life." Patricia appeared behind him, her usual poise shattered. "We can fix this," she pleaded, her eyes wild. "Dennis, darling, surely we can come to some arrangement. Think of the scandal, the family name." "Enough!" Dennis's voice boomed through the room. He stood, walking towards them without assistance. "The family name? The only thing tarnishing our name is your actions. It's over." As if on cue, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Mark's face drained of color. "You called the police? Your own son?" Dennis's expression was a mixture of pain and resolve. "You stopped being my son the moment you conspired against me." "Julia," he turned to me, "would you show the officers in?" I nodded, moving towards the door. As I passed Mark, he grabbed my arm. "Julia, please," he begged. "We can start over. I love you." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the stranger he'd become. "No, Mark," I said softly. "You love what I represented, a way to keep your lifestyle, your inheritance, but you never truly loved me." As the police entered, reading Mark and Patricia their rights, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was finally ending. Hours later, after the dust had settled and the house was quiet once more, Dennis and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set. "What now?" I asked, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. Dennis smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. "Now, we live. I'm thinking of selling the company, maybe starting a foundation. And you, Julia, you have your whole life ahead of you." I felt tears prick my eyes. I don't even know who I am anymore, outside of all this. Dennis squeezed my hand. "You're the woman who saved my life, who stood up for what's right no matter the cost. That's who you are, Julia, and I couldn't be prouder to call you family." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years I felt truly free to discover who I was, what I wanted, and where I belonged. "You're right," I said, smiling through my tears. "This isn't an ending, it's a new beginning." Dennis raised his glass of iced tea. "To new beginnings and to family, the kind we choose." I clinked my glass against his, feeling a surge of hope for the future. "To family," I echoed. As night fell, I realized that sometimes the greatest acts of love involve letting go. I had let go of a toxic marriage, of false dreams, and of the person I thought I needed to be. In return, I had gained something far more precious: self-respect, true family, and the courage to face whatever came next. The journey had been painful, but as I sat there with Dennis, I knew that every step had been worth it. We had faced our demons, exposed the truth, and come out stronger on the other side. And now, finally, we were free to write our own stories.